human normal worldview is grossly inaccurate. In fact, it's pretty much 180 degrees backwards from the actual condition that obtains here, the actual situation that this consists of. In a normal world, in a normal human worldview, we might suppose people think of the world is made of a bunch of individual components. The world is made of objects, there's things, there's the environment, there's weather systems, there's other life forms, there's social systems, there's all of these various components that are interacting in a very, very complex system. And one is oneself, one supposes, a component in that system, needs to interact with all these other components in the system in a way that is hopefully satisfactory. And that is pretty much held to be what is going on here in simple terms. This is, as I said, is grossly inaccurate. The actual situation is almost the opposite of that. There is one thing that is here, there's one condition that is here, there's one wholeness that is here, there's one actuality that is a unified entity. And there are no separate components. There are no separate objects. There are no separate conditions that are actually interacting with each other. It's understandable how that misinterpretation can arise, because we're all very familiar with all of this, all the way things seem to be, with all of these different shapes and objects moving around and physical sensations and so on and so forth. But this is an erroneous interpretation. So that's not a problem at all. There's nothing wrong with having an erroneous interpretation, except that the implications of this interpretation presents a lot of problematic implications, a lot of problematic notions that, oh my God, there's all of these, one has to succeed in life, one has to survive, one has to, navigate, one has to compete, one has to, all of these various things, and all of which requires a lot of effort and strategy and so on and so forth. And it's all a failure, because in the end you're going to die anyway. So it's not like it's a game you can win. So as a result, people walk around with a sort of a Weltschmerz. There's this universal worldview of, life basically sucks. And you do the best you can, and maybe you have some success and all of that, so very, very well and good. But by and large, it's a struggle. By and large, it's a lot of work. You get to the end of the day, or Miller time or whatever, and it just feels so good just to let go of all that and relax and collapse. But then, of course, the next day, you have to take it up again. The actuality is completely other than that. And in the actuality, there's absolutely no problems. In the actuality, there's no solutions, of course, since there's no problems. There is, in fact, no space and time. There is no conditions whatsoever that and objects do not interact with each other, and so on and so forth. And we'll go into this in some elaboration. So the fundamental spiritual problem is one of interpretation, is one of discovering that one's worldview has been a misinterpretation, and the only convincing way to discover that is to see directly what the actual condition is, which immediately disproves the erroneous misinterpretation.
Strange echo in
Well, I was noticing the big spire here. I think it probably improves our reception with the Space Brothers, So maybe get a broadcast from time to time. So, I have coined this phrase, radiant presence, to indicate what this actuality is that is here. We don't really have a good word for it in English. We have experience. Experience comes close, but experience is a little vague. Experience is sort of an overview classification or something. I don't know what. Experience doesn't seem to have the implication of a coherent, actual entity. What is here is essentially a unified field of, we can call it transcendental energy. Or you can call it consciousness if you want, if you have a very inclusive notion of that idea and so on. This wholeness alone exists. To you, it looks like the field of your experience. The field of your experience is the field of radiant presence. The field of your experience is the actuality that is here. Of course, we all know this intuitively. Little children know this. Little children know it's all about them. They're the center of the world. The world appears and dances around them. And, so this is intuitively felt, and we're all familiar with this worldview from our own primitive recollections as infants. Although with our prolonged indoctrination into adulthood, we get all of these overlays of a sense of a self and a sense of involvement in life and so on and so forth. In the Hermetic tradition, which is lost, the origins of it are lost in history. It's thought to perhaps be a continuation of ancient Egyptian metaphysics or whatever, who knows. But it was continued into Arabic mysticism, particularly as alchemy, through the first millennium AD. And then these alchemical texts started to show up in Europe as translations mostly from Arabic, and a few originals in Greek and so on and so forth. And within this tradition, there was a wonderful direct allusion to this actuality, this transcendental field of actuality. In alchemy, they called it the prima materia, the first matter, i.e. the matter which all matter is made of, the matter which everything consists of, the stuff, the substance that everything consists of. And of course, they're very deliberately vague as to what this is. The tradition was quite deliberately esoteric, and I don't know, it's hard to know what the strategy was. Obviously, in the Middle Ages, it became important to avoid the Inquisition and so on. But at any rate, alchemical symbolism was deliberately ambiguous, deliberately very vague. And if you didn't know what it was talking about, you wouldn't be able to know what it was talking about, because it was a bizarre concatenation of all sorts of strange symbolism. So there's this notion of this prima materia, the first matter, that the alchemists use as a starting point and the actual field of operation of all of the alchemical work. In Western magical traditions, there came to be a parallel notion of the astral light, which is held to be a field of subtle energy that's basically a continuum. It's something like the electromagnetic spectrum, but it's not limited to being a simply physical field, a physical continuum, but rather it's held to be a continuum of subtle energies that basically includes all aspects of reality. And these, of course, are basically the same idea. And both these ideas refer very nicely to what I call the radiant presence. Of course, there's no words for what this is. It is this. It is this actuality that is here. It's non-verbal. It's not a word. It has no labels. It has no, URL. But of course, it doesn't really need one, because here it is. But since we are so semantically conditioned as human beings to think of things that, in terms of what we call them, in terms of what we think of them as being, and we have no language to refer to this actuality. We can talk endlessly about these supposed components. We can talk about rugs and rooms and people and chairs and lights and deserts and California and global geopolitical situation and so on and so forth, all of these things. But all these things are supposedly relatively separate components rather than this continuum itself, this experiential continuum, which of course is the sole actuality that is available. It's the only thing you've ever experienced, right? Have you ever experienced anything other than the field of your experience? I mean, how could you? Where would you look for it? Where would you go? So the field of your experience is actual. And if you look, you'll notice it's the sole actuality. How can you find anything other than the field of your experience? Where would you look for it? You have to look in experience, and of course what you find will be experience. It's unpredictable what it will look like. Experience is very slippery because it can look like anything. It can look like light, sound, texture of touch. It can look like thought. It can look like emotion. It can look like various, transcendental psychic vibes or who knows what. So there's all of these different guises, all these different seeming textures, experiential textures that can appear within or as the field of experience. But they never depart from experience. They're never anything more or less than experience. So if you look at any aspect, any level of density of experience, you essentially find the same condition. It seems very different, sort of a material experience seems to have a certain density and quality which is radically different than the quality of thought, radically different than the quality of deep sleep. But if you look very closely, you will discover they're in fact the same, made of the same substance, functioning in the same way. So that which is above is as that which is below, and that which is below is as that which is above. So any degree of density you go to, you find the same thing going on in the same way. To perpetrate the miracles of the one thing. It's one thing. The radiance, the prima materia, the astral light, whatever you want to call it. There's one energetic actuality that is the substance of reality itself. That is this that's right here, right now, right? This is it. It's not particularly esoteric, it's completely obvious. And they call it miracles to indicate that the way this works is completely wildly irrational, illogical, unexplainable. How can this be? How can this exist? How can this be here? How can this be the way it is with this inconceivable complexity and subtlety, this inconceivable actuality? How can that happen? It's a miracle. It's very simple. As all things are from one by the meditation of this one, so from this one come all things by adaptation. So this one field of radiance, all things are from it, right? This room is from the radiance as an abstraction, right? This body, the experience of this body is from the radiance, and so on and so forth. Anything that can appear is abstracted from the actuality of experience itself, of radiance, of radiant presence. By the meditation of this one. There's some dispute whether that word should be meditation or mediation, but it amounts to the same thing, so it's irrelevant. I went with meditation arbitrarily because it's more problematic. So it makes it more fun to talk about. But so things arise from the one by its own meditation. It looks at itself and basically free associates or hallucinates all of these conditions. Very much like we do at night when we dream. When we dream, the sleeping consciousness is looking at itself, nothing in particular, and yet gradually or suddenly or however, it seems to it seems to sort of precipitate into, somewhat specific forms and somewhat specific situations, and all of this that just sort of seem to be there, self-actualizing and relative to each other, and seems to form a whole, but however it shows up, right? So simply by the sleeping consciousness looking at itself, all of that arises. So from this one thing come all things by adaptation. From the continuum of radiance, from the continuum of that vertical column of all possible densities of subtle energy, vibration, all things appear. Its father is the sun, its mother is the moon, the wind carries it in its belly, the nurse thereof is the earth. The father is the sun, it comes from its own radiance, it comes from the eye seeing, it comes from the initial positivity of its very nature. Its mother is the moon. It tends to objectify itself, it tends to see itself as object. In a movie theater analogy, there tends to seem to be a screen that the light can shine upon. The light shines, that's the sun as its father, but the light seems to shine on a screen. So when you dream, the dreaming consciousness shines forth, not just passively, as we might imagine, but creatively, and it seems to objectify itself. There seems to be a screen, there seems to be an otherness, there seems to be a world or whatever that virtually seems to show up. Or if you ever tried deep meditation or prolonged meditation, you'll discover the same phenomena. It's very much like dreaming, where there'll be essentially nothing going on, or various subtle amorphous, presence, whatever, and it will seem to coalesce into various degrees of coherence that will sort of may drift in and out, and so on. But however it is for you. But anyway, this aspect is. Very familiar. The wind carries in its belly, the nurse thereof is the earth. So the wind, the air, is all the possibility of all these vibrations. It's like the flickers of light like in a snowstorm. All this amazing incoherent flashes of light that are not particularly resolved into anything. But that becomes the basis for free associating coherence. Like if you look at your field of vision closely, you'll notice it's very pixelated. It's actually, countless tiny, minuscule flickerings. If you close your eyes and look at the field of your closed eyes, you'll notice this very, very quickly. You'll see a virtual continuum of countless instantaneous flickering presences of light, like fireflies or stars or something, who knows what. And actually, when your eyes are open, you're seeing the same thing. If you look closely at what you're perceiving, it's very easy to see this if you're looking at something relatively undifferentiated like the sky. If you look into a clear sky, you'll notice right away all this flickering. That is usually attributed to a random action in the what you call the nerves in the eye and so on. But that's just a materialistic explanation of it. The experiential phenomena is of a field of dynamism, a field of basically amorphous dynamism, which is the air that is its gestation, its potential. And the nurse is the earth. So then out of this comes degrees of apparent coherence, degrees of apparent form, degrees of entities and objects and so on that we're all very familiar with. And again, this is a continuum, like we talked about when in the image of the four elements. It's a continuum of apparent density and apparent coherence with objects and then these flickers. And if you look closely at objects, you'll see lots of flickers. And if you look at the flickers, you'll tend to see objects. So it's it's not a simple either or where it's one thing or another. It's always a continuum. It's always a spectrum. How are we doing? It's going too slow.
What was it?
Yeah. Saw something? No.
I'm just
Okay.
looking at my hand.
Yeah, that's a good thing to do, by the way. It is the Father of all perfection and the consummation of the whole world. So this field of radiant presence, this field of actuality, is complete. It is whole. It is perfect. The whole world is complete in its inclusion as this unified field of actuality, this unified field of radiant presence that your experience consists of, that your being consists of. Its power is integral if it be turned to earth. In other words, dealing with it as form, as circumstance, is learning to deal with it effectively. It's, in spirit, this indicates an aspect in spirituality and problems. It's very easy to get kind of escapist. The spirituality is out there. In the amorphousness is this wonderful wholeness and this wonderful completeness and the light of God and angels and continuums and the purity of consciousness and all that. But then you come here and you have to pay bills and someone's cutting you off in traffic and you want to give them the finger and all this stuff. That's it too. That's nothing other than the radiance too. The radiance can look like that and is doing that. Now, the next paragraph that's underlined, this indicates the actual practice of the yoga. The yoga of radiant presence is very precisely indicated in this paragraph. Thou shalt separate the earth from the fire, the subtle from the coarse, gently and with much ingenuity. What this means is, look at your actual experience. And it doesn't matter where. Look at anywhere within your experience, and it will, and this goes back to the very first sentence we saw. True without error, self-error, finally certain. So you look at any portion of your experience, and right away there will be a first take on what it seems to be, the way it seems to be. Whatever it is, doesn't matter. If you look closer, you will discover more subtlety. You will discover more dimension. You will discover less coherence, and it will kind of open continually. So you're separating earth from fire. So the earth is your first take. The earth is the superficial aspect of what an experience seems to be, the sort of the superficial aspect of its form. And as you are with this closely, experientially, your consciousness will spontaneously go to more subtle aspects, to sort of dynamism, to sort of, you might say, a more subtle energetic presentation that the experience actually consists of. So the earth from the fire, the subtle from the coarse. So obviously the coarse is the earth and the subtle is the fire, the more essential, dynamic, energetic aspect that experience actually consists of. And by looking at any particular experience, you will discover this. You will discover both your first interface with it as something, and then if you continue to notice it, you will discover more and more subtlety, more and more nuance, more and more openness and dimension. Gently and with much ingenuity. Obviously, you don't do this mechanically or dully. This is an engagement of subtlety, of sensitivity, of intelligence, of subtle participation. It ascends from earth to heaven and descends again to earth. So, you will notice your experience moves from more formal aspects into more and more subtle aspects. But the formal aspects haven't gone anywhere, and so your attention will come back to this. And this is very typical. And again, we notice this all the time. Spiritual seekers are continually complaining, I looked and I have all this wonderful openness, but then it all collapsed and I lost it all. This is the very nature of the dynamism of the radiance. It is totally unstable. It does not stay anywhere. It moves from one condition to another. It continually breathes. It continually drifts away from itself, from what it has been. And as it drifts away, whatever it drifts to, it'll drift away from that as well, continually. Endlessly dynamism and endlessly flowing. So it ascends from earth to heaven and descends again to earth. The symbolism of, relatively coarse, coherent modes of experiencing and relatively subtle, incoherent, more multidimensional modes of experiencing. And it receives the power of the superior and the inferior. Again, this echoes that which is above is that which is below. So the nature of what it is that is more subtle, that is less coherent, and the nature of what it is that is more coherent are both values, they're both powers, they're both potencies, they're both assets. They're both meaningful and profound ways that the radiance manifests, that the radiance functions as. They're modes of your expression, they're modes of your manifestation, of your self-engagement. So it ascends from earth to heaven, descends again to earth, and receives the power of the superior and inferior. So this is the yoga of radiant presence. This is the whole course of it. Simply being with your experience and letting it move into itself and letting it move back. And just it moves around endlessly through itself, exploring itself. And if you do this with subtlety, with intelligent engagement, it cumulatively refines its understanding of itself. It's spiritual ignorance is a lot like childishness. We're settling for very simplistic explanations. We're settling for there's a Santa Claus and God's in heaven and all's right with the world. But then when the experience looks at itself, it discovers, wait a minute, there's other things going on here. It's very subtle. It's very weird. It's very interesting, and it reveals itself to itself simply by being with itself. Nothing else can reveal itself because it is subtler than everything, than anything. It can't be described, it can't be put. It can't be, you can't write a paragraph and say specifically exactly how what this really is, and you read it and you go, oh, okay, now I know. It's not like that. One has to develop a sensitivity, one has to develop subtlety to be able to be with it as it is. And it's actually easier than that because you don't need to. There's a shortcut in the lazy man's approach. You don't actually have to develop subtlety because you already have subtlety. It's more a matter of recognizing the subtlety that you intrinsically consist of. Because the radiance is already the radiance. The radiance is already absolute transcendental intelligence. And the apparent dullness that ignorance consists of is just a mode of it being with itself that exists in the context of its intrinsic subtlety, its intrinsic hyperintelligence. So, that's why I like this word noticing, because you're not learning to do anything that you aren't already doing. You're rather noticing what experience actually already consists of. So it's completely effortless. Thus thou hast the glory of the whole world, therefore let all obscurity flee before thee. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. This is the whole shooting match. This is what's going on here. This is the absolute epitome of human achievement. Self-realization, realization of reality, realization of actuality, the discovery of the actuality of the serpent eating its tail is the glory of the whole world. It's as good as it gets. That's the treasure. That's the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. The nature of this is being communicated. This actuality here of your experiential field, your experience is right here, right now. It's actual, it's real. It's the soul actuality. There's nothing else whatsoever that you can possibly find. You are the sole inhabitant of your universe. You are the sole inhabitant of the field of your experience. And it's happening right here, right now, always, just like usual, like same old, same old. It looks like whatever it looks like. Now it looks like, maybe being in this room and this talk and thinking whatever you're thinking and remembering whatever you're remembering and being annoyed at whatever you're annoyed at and so on. It's all this amazing cascade, this movie, this continually dynamic presentation of all these qualities, right, that never resolve to anything. They never stabilize. They're just instantly wafting through and then something else wafting through. But the field never comes and goes, right? The radiance never comes and goes. What it looks like is continually changing. Like when you dream at night, the dreaming doesn't come and go. The dreaming is just this. But it looks like this and that, and someone's coming and some condition's coming and you have to go do something and you're running away from something. Who knows what, right? Doesn't matter. And human normal consensus reality view has it all asked backwards. We think what's important is what's coming and going. We think what's important is this entity or that entity, this condition or that condition, and completely ignore the field, the actuality of the continuum of the field of experience, which never comes and goes. It's always you, here, now, right? That's what it is right now, right? It's always that, never been anything else. It's always you, here, now. Always looks different, but every instant looks different. So whatever it looks like now is already gone forever, right? And you go to sleep, it's still you here now, looking like that. You start dreaming, it's you here now, looking like that. So the radiance doesn't change. Just all of these different vibrations, like in the vertical column. This is in the chakra systems. You're all familiar with the maps of the chakras and all that. This vertical column of the subtle energy spectrum is literally what this is made of. What the reality of the universe, what the reality of your being consists of, is this field of call it subtle energy vibration. You can't. What does that mean? What's subtle energy mean? What's vibration mean? You can't analyze it, but that's not the point. The point is that you don't need to analyze it, but you can know it very intimately. And what it shows up as is this astounding range of experiential conditions and textures that present themselves as everything you have ever and will ever experience. All these qualities, all of this, all these experiential characteristics of all this amazing range of density, the fineness of these subtle psychic vibrations or whatever, right? And thought and emotion and physical sensation, and it's all of these textures that just continually present themselves. And this vertical column, it doesn't just symbolize it, it actually is experienceable as this. You can experience the continuity, the continuum of the field of your own energy presence. It's not that it's literally vertical and it's literally arranged in an upright line, and yet in a strange way it is. In a strange way it's palpable. If any of you have ever done any kind of physical yoga or meditation, you'll notice if you sit upright, there's a different kind of alignment can come in. If you sort of flunk like this, it's not better or worse, but it's different. It's palpably different in its energy character, in its you can't say in what, but nonetheless it's experientially actual and different. And the point is to play with this stuff, to be with this in all its modes, and let yourself discover what it is. And this is the yoga. The yoga is very, very simple. Simply being with experience and let it show you what it is. But the trick to this is to do it, as the Emerald Tablet says, suavely and with much ingenuity. In other words, do it with intelligence, do it with sensitivity. Be with your experience, in a spirit of questioning, in a spirit of intelligent investigation. Not analysis, but like the way you would explore a fine wine you've never tasted or something like that. Or, someone says, this is amazing, just taste this. And he gives you a taste of some dish. Well, how would you approach that? You approach it with subtlety. You approach it with, that's okay. You can do that, but you don't have to. You can be with it. You can really be with what's there and see how finely you can do it. And there's no limit to how finely this can be done because, again, it's an infinite spectrum of subtlety. And it already is that. It's not like you need to develop subtlety. The subtlety is already there. You just need to let yourself access it, notice it. Because the full range of the spectrum is already intrinsically present. Realization is already present. This is, and never has been, anything other than reality, nakedly revealing itself. And realization is simply noticing that fact. You don't need to do anything, you don't need to achieve anything or change anything. So it's really a kind of, you could say, sensitivity training. It's a matter of letting yourself, let it show you what it is by being sensitive to it, to being with it as it is. So it's like It's like learning to listen to good music or learning to enjoy anything. How do you do that? You do it by, subtlety and intelligence and intimacy of experience, of engagement, of feeling. It's not an abstraction. It's not a process of thought or analysis. On the contrary, it's a process of absolute intimate textural engagement. And this is the yoga of radiant presence. This is how it works. And of course, this is not really any news. All human experience has never been anything other than this. Become a subtle person or be a clod, How do you become a subtle person? Well, develop subtlety. Yeah.
When?
So, it begins with a quote from Jesus' Gospel of Thomas. If you don't fast from the things of the world, you won't find the kingdom. The only actuality, the only thing actually present, by the way, that's right here, right now, is what experience is made of, that I call radiant presence, and we'll go into this in some detail. All apparent interpretations, all things, all entities, all events, all beings, all conditions, all meanings, etc., 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 anything you can slap a name on, are in actuality nothing whatever other than the soul substance, radiant presence. This substance alone exists, is real. All these apparent conditions, events, and entities that may seem to exist appear solely due to the inherent nature of the substance, radiant presence. Radiant presence is the sole actuality. Appears as it does solely due to its inherent nature, is entirely beyond space and time, appears as experience, is the sole energy and sole substance, is intensely engaged with itself, appears as subjectivity and objectivity, appears as analysis of itself, appears as infinitely differentiated from itself without ever departing from itself in the slightest. It entirely transcends logic, rationality, describability, analysis, modeling, etc., etc. The yoga consists of seeing that this is so. It takes advantage of its inherent self-analysis and self-engagement as the vehicle for verification of the fact that it is entirely transcendental. This is the key that reveals its actual nature and invalidates erroneous interpretation. In practice, simply notice, feel, that any actual experience completely transcends logic, rationality, describability, analysis, modeling, etc. What we're trying to deal with here is essentially inexpressible. It cannot be captured in human terms. If it was easy to capture in words, all this stuff would be so easy. You just write a paragraph saying what it is and give it to everyone, and everyone would know reality, right? But it doesn't seem to work like that. The nature of what this is happens to be very strange relative to human perspective, so human language can't address it very neatly, very coherently.
So why should we discuss it then?
Well, we'll see. We'll find out. Because, and this will become apparent, because words are more than words, language is more than language, and certainly communication is vastly more than communication. We'll go into this in great detail later. For the first hour or so, I'm basically going to be sitting here talking about this, and then I'll open the floor to discussion. But please try to avoid as much as possible letting yourself go into a passive mode or a numbness of sitting, being an audience. This is really about you. You're the star of this show, so please enjoy the limelight. Okay. We'll skip over the quote from Jesus. We'll come back to it after we've gone through the paper. We'll start with the first sentence. The only actuality, the only thing actually present, is what experience is made of. Okay. What's actuality mean? This is actuality, right? This that is here, right? Everything you would say, what's going on? You'd say, well, I'm here and I'm in San Rafael and I'm sitting in this chair and I'm at this silly talk and blah, 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 blah. All of that, that's actuality. That's what you're talking about. So actuality means not some abstract concept, not some philosophy, but this very concrete, stuff that we call experience. Experience is happening right here, right now, and it's real, it's actual. Now, experience is very interesting. We usually go right to the content, right? We go to the storyline. We want to know what's happening here, who's who, what's what, what's going on. So we're going to the storyline, we're going to an interpretation. How often do you think about what experience is made of? How often do you think about what consciousness is? How often do you think about what light that appears as your field of vision is? How often do you think about what sound that appears in your consciousness is? How often do you think about what these things actually are? If you're like most people, probably not a whole hell of a lot. You're much more interested in the plot lines and who's doing what and what you're going to do tomorrow and so on and so forth. Which is fine, of course. There's a lot of fun in that, as we all know. But it turns out that what's really interesting, what's really valuable, and from the spiritual point of view, what's really powerful, is what this is actually made of, the substance of experience itself. Well, we all know a lot about the plot line and what we're used to saying is, what we're interested in, what we're used to thinking is happening. But typically we don't know, we haven't paid a lot of attention to the substance. But that's the only thing that's actually here. Isn't that interesting? All these plot lines are abstractions. They aren't actually here. When you see someone, you're seeing me right now, right? You're not seeing me, you're seeing a pattern of light in your field of vision. How could you see me? All you ever see is light in your field of vision. So the substance is actually the only thing you ever contact. You might say, oh, I saw Peter Brown and he was this or that and the other, but all that's an abstraction. The only actuality that's really present in your experience is a pattern of light, and in this case, a pattern of sound, right? So that's very interesting. So, as far as you know, I am light and sound. And what exactly is light and sound? Well, maybe we'll look into that. So, let's look at a TV show. A TV show is a really good example, okay? You look at a TV show, say you're watching some show. I don't watch TV, so I don't know any current shows to talk about, but let's say Seinfeld. Seinfeld's on TV, and you're laughing at the jokes, and you're looking at Kramer and wandering around, and all this craziness is going on, and that's really a lot of fun, right? Where is Kramer? Where are the jokes? Where's the action? All that there is when you're watching TV is little flashes of light on a screen. There's no people there. There's no action. There's no movement. When you're watching TV and you see someone walk from there to there, across the room, no one's walking. There's no movement from there to there. There's just flashes of light that aren't moving anywhere. They're just sitting there flashing. When every time you've ever watched TV, you've never seen anything but flashes of light. TV would be pretty boring for most people if you let yourself notice that, right? Well, I've been watching these flashes of light for the last hour, let's go get some tea and then come back and watch it for another hour. So we go to these abstract interpretations of the patterns, but they aren't even really there. They're just implied by the patterns that show up in these flashes of light. But there's nothing actually there but the flashes of light. And of course sound, we're just talking about a single medium now, but you can do the math and figure that out. So every time you watch TV, you're just seeing flashes of light. Nothing's happening. Right now, nothing's happening. You're seeing a field of light, intricate patterns that seem to be shifting to some degree, right? You're hearing sound that seems to be, getting louder and softer in different frequencies or what have you. You're feeling sensations, certain tingles, right? So on. So all that's really happening is that raw energy present in experience. The mind can take it instantly and interpret it. Oh, this sensation is my butt on the chair. This sensation is talking in the room. This sensation is I'm seeing a room with stuff in it, and so on and so forth. But none of that stuff is actually here. That's interpretations of what is actually here, what is actually in your experience, what your experience actually is, which is a mysterious energy present. Light in consciousness, sound in consciousness, touch in consciousness. So, and if you think about that in terms of the TV analogy, it's kind of interesting. It's kind of a little different perspective than normal consensus reality. Okay, that's beginning to touch on the first sentence. All apparent interpretations, all things, entities, events, beings, conditions, meanings, etc., are in actuality nothing whatever other than the soul's substance. Now, this is basically what we talked about. So what's a thing? Well, a person is a thing, a room is a thing, a chair is a thing, the floor is a thing, the light coming in the door is a thing, all these gaudy pictures on the walls are things, right? So there's all these things, but there's no things there. What they actually are is the substance. What they actually are is light, in terms of your field of vision. All these sounds you're hearing words, you're hearing an air conditioner outside, you hear people rustle in their seats next to you, whatever, anything you hear, you're not hearing any of those things. All you're really hearing is sound. So on and so forth. Interpretations of events, well, there's a chain of events, you were out there and then you came and you sat in your chair and now you're sitting, and after a little while you're going to get up and you're going to go get a tea or go to lunch or something and then come back or whatever it is you're going to do. All of that chain of events is nothing except patterns of light, patterns of sound, patterns of sensation, patterns of thought, so on and so forth. So all apparent interpretations, all things, all entities, all beings, everyone you've ever known, you've never known anyone. All you've ever known is patterns of energy in your own experience. Think about a dream. You have a dream last night. Maybe you dreamed you were talking to people or you were involved in some complicated situation with people or something, right? There was no one there. You weren't even there. You may have seen yourself in the dream walking around doing stuff, whatever. You weren't there. How could you be there? You're sleeping. You're dreaming it all. And yet you seem to be there. These other people seem to be there. There seems to be all of this interesting engagement and so on and so forth. But all that was really there was dreaming, the presence of energy patterns in your consciousness. So, next sentence. This substance alone exists is real. All these apparent conditions, events, and entities that may seem to exist appear solely due to the inherent nature of the substance. So, where do all these patterns come from? Right? So there's all these patterns of light, all these patterns of sound, all these patterns. Let's take a dream. In a dream, you can have a really complicated dream. When we try and think of our dreams from the waking state, right? When you try and remember your dreams from the waking state, they may seem sort of blurry and vague and, dreamlike. But most of that, or much of that, is caused by memory, because in the waking state it's hard to remember the dream. If you try to remember what you had for lunch yesterday, you'll remember it, but it's not going to be nearly as detailed as the actual lunch you had, right? It's going to be vague and fuzzy and so on. Memory is fuzzy. So, in a dream, where do the patterns come from? It's not like you see someone. It's not like you see someone because there's someone there. Why do you see someone? In the waking world, we have these theories of, I see you because you're there and the light's bouncing off you and hitting my retinas and activating my nerves and blah, 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 right? All the usual, physiology. But in a dream, how do you see somebody? Why are they there? They're not actually there. I mean, you wake up and you know there was no one. You don't even have eyes in a dream. How do you see in a dream? You don't have ears. How do you hear? Where do all these patterns come from? Well, they just appear spontaneously. They're just there. Where do these patterns come from? Well, the materialist will say they're actually there, and the patterns arise as a result of impact with actual objective objects. But how can you possibly know that, since all you ever experience is light in your consciousness? How can you know that there's an objective entity that is responsible for it? I mean, that's a viable theory. Maybe there is, but it's absolutely unverifiable. So, we look at the empirical reality. You look at what's actually here, and you find this incredible patterning of, call it, energy in your experience, in your consciousness. So, radiant presence is the soul actuality. We've talked about this a lot. All that there is this highly detailed, incredibly strange energy, dynamic energy pattern appearing in your experience. It appears as it does solely due to its inherent nature, and we'll go into this a little bit later, but in other words, there's nothing outside of it that's making it be the way it is. It just is like that. Like when you have a dream, there's nothing making you dream what you happen to dream. It just arises. It just appears spontaneously from within your nature, from within what you are, right? It's not like there's some machinery or some board of directors or something that's sitting overseeing the whole thing, directing it or controlling it or making it, be the way it is. It just appears that way, effortlessly, smoothly, spontaneously. And we'll go into this, but all experience is actually like that. It's entirely beyond space and time. Well, that's interesting. That sounds pretty intense. I mean, that sounds pretty extreme. Well, here's space and time. How do you get beyond space and time? Well, where is space and time? Where is it? In your experience. Try and find space outside of your experience. Try and find time outside of your experience. And space and time are not as simplistic as we think they are. I mean, time, we usually, the normal conception is time is this, this never-ending, unstoppable flow of events that goes from the beginning of time, the Big Bang or whatever, and it goes through billions and billions of years, and here we are, and it's going through into the future. This moment is this tiny little infinitesimal blip in this vast flow, right? But look at your experience. Where is time? Time is now, isn't it? Now is obvious. Here's now. Is it ever not now? Where's then? Have you ever experienced a then? Have you ever experienced a yesterday? When you're experiencing yesterday, it's always now. I mean, now is tomorrow's yesterday, but it's not a yesterday, it's a now. It's always a now. So time is very interesting. It's very slippery. It's not as simplistic as we're used to thinking of it, and abstractly as this, big objective flow that we're these tiny little motes of dust in. Maybe time is a tiny mote of dust appearing in the vastness of you. Maybe it's the other way around. Anyway, that's something to play with, and we'll be going into all this at great length. This is just scratching the surface. This is just kind of setting the stage. So, if it's not really clicking in fully in place, don't worry about it. So that's time. Time is very strange. Time turns out to be now, and a bunch of abstractions about it. Where's space? Well, where are you? Here, right? If I ask you where you are, what are you going to say? I'm here. Okay, cool. Where is this room? Well, it's here. Where is that building across the alley there, if those of you can see outside the door? Well, you might say it's there, but where are you seeing it? I'm seeing it here. It's appearing here in my experience, right? The building across the street out there that I can see outside the front window of the store at the moment is appearing here in my experience. If I look up into the sky and see the sun, where is it appearing? It's appearing here in my experience. Now I may have theories, no, but it's really out there and it's a long ways away and it's, millions, billions of miles and blah, blah, whatever, right? But that's a bunch of theories, that's a bunch of abstractions. What's the actuality? The actuality is experience happens here. So all of space is within your experience. Have you ever experienced space outside your experience? I mean, how could that happen? How can it happen except as an abstract idea? And where would that abstract idea occur? Here, within your experience. So, space and time are not necessarily, when you look at them experientially, as simple as we might be used to thinking of them. And, it becomes really quite obvious when you look into it carefully that space and time are small things that happen in the vastness of experience, not the other way around. So it appears as experience. Experience is it. Try and find anything other than experience. Where are you going to look? Experience is the sole actuality in practical terms. In actual fact. Where are you going to find anything other than experience? Where would you look? You'd have to look with your experience. Experience is like a bubble that contains everything. And if it's not in your experience, it's nothing. It doesn't exist. The army of Martian pink elephants that's currently storming through that door doesn't exist. Why? Because it's not in your experience. Well, the thought may be in your experience because I said it. Right. But that's the presence of a thought, not a presence of an army of pink elephants, right? So so what's your criteria of real? When I say such and such is the case, you say, no, that's not true. It's not real. On what basis do you say that? The real basis, if you look closely, is whether or not it is in your experience. The pink elephants are not real because they aren't in your experience. This cup is real. Everyone see it? Because it's in your experience. If your eyes are closed, maybe it's not so real. Maybe it's the claim of the cup. So imagine a cup that you have that's in some place you've never been and you're never going to be, that you've never seen before and you're never going to see. How real is it? I mean, it's getting pretty theoretical, isn't it? I mean, as far as you're concerned, it's not real. Even if someone else saw it and told you about it, the only thing that would be real for you is their statement. And maybe they were wrong. Maybe they didn't see a cup. Maybe they're lying. Right? Okay. It is the radiant presence is the soul energy and the soul substance. Okay. There's a lot of energy here, right? There's a lot of stuff happening. Gravity is working. The sunlight is streaming. Air is moving. All of this dynamism's happening in your body. Your blood's pumping, and the cells are just churning away at 1 billion miles a minute, and so on and so forth. Which is a display of a certain force, a display of a certain energy, a certain, push. Let's say. Where does that push come from? Is it some separate thing out here that sort of reaches into your experience and makes all this event happen? Well, the energy is inherent in what experience is. Experience is its own energy. It makes its own gravity. Like when you dream, where does the energy to dream come from? It doesn't come from the dream. It doesn't come from outside. It just spontaneously arises out of consciousness, out of your dreaming. And if you didn't know you were awake now, suppose all of a sudden you woke up and this turned out to be a dream, how would this be happening? And how can you tell this isn't a dream? How can you be absolutely certain this isn't an incredibly detailed dream that really, really seems to be happening? Because it's going to go away. I mean, when you go to sleep, it's going to disappear. When you go to sleep, the whole world disappears, doesn't it? We call it, from the waking state, we call it going to sleep. But from the sleep state, what do you call the waking state? You don't call it anything because you don't remember it. You don't know it even was ever there. So anyway, these are some interesting points we can touch on. It's intensely engaged with itself. Well, this is very interesting. So you're engaged with your experience, right? I mean, you're watching it, you're seeing it, you can't not do it. I mean, when you're asleep, you're engaged with sleep. When you're dreaming, you're engaged with dream. When you're awake, you're engaged with your wakefulness. You're engaged with it just by experiencing it. You're engaged absolutely, automatically, intimately with the field of vision, with the field of hearing. You can't turn them off, can you? You can't stop them. Field of touch. All these things you're all over them. You're just like, just completely one with them. So where does this engagement come from? Are you doing it on purpose? Are you like saying, okay, gosh, I have to really experience my experience now, right? Try not experiencing your experience. Try shutting it down. Try just, okay, now I'm not going to see. It doesn't work so well, does it? So where does this intense engagement come from? That it's just completely, into itself. It's completely locked onto itself. And when I say it, you might say, oh, but is my consciousness engaged with my experience? But consciousness is a word for what? You can't actually find consciousness. It's a claim, it's an assertion. This is being experienced, apparently, but that's just another, logical circumlocution. It's just a claim. You can't find a consciousness. You can't find an object. It's just this one fact of experiencing is palpably here, and it's engaged with itself. If you want to call it, well, my consciousness is experiencing the characteristics that are appearing in it, you can use that complicated language. But if you go looking, you can't find either anything you're referring to in that statement, so it's unnecessarily a complication. Just simply, this that is here is engaged with itself. It appears as subjectivity and objectivity. So objectivity is certainly here, right? The room is here, all these people are here, all the stuff, the field of vision is here and all that. Your thoughts are here. Your emotions are here. The feeling of, your gut reacting to your breakfast or whatever is here. All these things are here, and we're used to having a classification of, no, that's objective and this is subjective, right? No, the floor is objective, but my thoughts are subjective, right? But the thoughts are here just as much as the floor is here, in my experience. They're energy patterns appearing in experience. Or whatever. I mean, let's just call them energy patterns without worrying too much about exactly what that consists of. So, objectivity is here, subjectivity is here. It's the same here. They're the same place. Where's my field of vision appearing? Where's your field of vision appearing? Where are your thoughts appearing? Where's your where's your emotions appearing? Just here, right, in your experience. And it's the same here. There's not one here for subjectivity and another here for objectivity. It's over there somewhere, right? You see this room here in your experience. You think your thoughts here in this experience, so on and so forth. So it appears as subjectivity and objectivity. It appears as analysis of itself. Well, that's very interesting. So, how can you look around and in a nanosecond, with like no passage of time, you know what everything is. You know those are pictures. You know this is a room. You know those are lights. You know that's a silly model of the solar system. You know that's a carpet. You know these are chairs. You know these are other... How does that happen? It's not like you have to sit and think about it, is it? I mean, look at how instantaneously powerful the intelligent processing is of analysis of experience. Instantly. I mean, you can walk into a room where you've never been before and you have no idea what to expect, and almost instantly you'll know what everything is, more or less. That's a machine, that's a doorway, that's a picture, that's a light, that's a this, that's a that. Right? It is analyzing, looking at itself and trying to sort itself out is a spontaneous urge. You don't even have to learn to do it. Curiosity is a spontaneous urge. It just shows up, right? Intelligence is curious. Experience is curious. And since experience has nothing to look at but itself, it's curious about itself. And so, hence you have our experience, where we're just completely maniacs about all the stuff that's going on in our experience. And we're effortlessly experts in it. We're effortlessly, completely engaged with it. And all this analysis just shows up. Right? Just bang, it's just there. It appears as infinitely differentiated from itself without ever departing from itself in the slightest. Well, this is interesting. If you look at your field of vision, how many colors are you seeing right now? For example, right? You couldn't count them, right? Everything you see is a different shade of color, and a different shade of brightness. And even something that's a particular color, if you look very closely, immediately next to it, it's a slightly different shade of the same color. And next to that's different. You could spend the rest of your life cataloging all the colors you see in one instant of your experience, and you still would never get to the end of the list, right? So just your field of vision is infinitely differentiated, and in the next instant it's different, because your head's shifted, your eyes are shifted, and as soon as you shift anything, everything changes, doesn't it? Right? Maybe not heavily, maybe it's more or less the same, but in specifics, it's completely different. And again, the field. If you look at the field of hearing, you find the same thing. All the sense fields have all of this incredible differentiation, all this amazing information in it, and every bit of the information is different from every other bit of the information, or it would all smear together into gray or whatever, right? So there's all of this incredible complexity of detail, and as much as if you look closer, you find more. It's not like you can look, and now I've got it all. I've got all the detail that's present in my experience right now. You look closer, you find more. You look closer than that, you find more. You look closer than that, you find more. So there's basically an infinite degree of differentiation that appears in experience, just in an instant, like right now, always. And yet, here's your field of vision. It's got all this inconceivable. Every single portion of it is different from every other single portion of it, dynamically, changingly, instant to instant. And yet, it's all one thing. It's all just vision. It never stops being vision. It never gets so different that suddenly it's not vision anymore, suddenly it's not light. It's just vision. Hearing is just hearing. However, you can be listening to the most complicated, symphony or rock band, and, noise from a computer and everything all at once, and it's all of this incredible detail and information, but it never departs from sound. It's just sound. It's just hearing. It's one thing. And here's your field of vision right here now, right? You're seeing, right? Vision is present. Here's your field of hearing right now. You're hearing sound in your experience, right? Are they different from each other? Well, sure. Vision, I can recognize the difference between vision and sound, but are they both experience? Are they anything other than experience? Of course they're not. Nothing departs from experience. Experiential field is one thing. And even though it's infinitely differentiated within itself, it never departs from itself. It never becomes anything else. You've never think of everything you've experienced all your life. It's just, it's absurd. No way you could think of it, but just imagine thinking of everything you've ever experienced since you were, since you can remember experiencing. Just, everything you've ever seen, everything you've ever thought, everything you've ever felt. And it's all, and right now your experience is exactly the same as it was when you were 6 months old, isn't it? It's just experience. It's your field of experience. It hasn't changed. It's just consciousness, light, sound, whatever. So it never departs from itself. It always is what it is, even though it presents us all of this inconceivable complexity. Now, it entirely transcends logic, rationality, describability, analysis, modeling, etc. Nothing makes any sense. Okay? We have all of these elaborate descriptions, and scientists and doctors and all these people can weigh in on what's going on, but none of it actually pins anything down. None of it actually is accurate. None of it actually brings it down. Those of you that have heard me talk have probably heard me say 1,000 times, if you've got all the Nobel Prize winning physicists from all of history into this room right now and ask them, what is an electron, say? To a person, they would say, we don't know. We can tell you a whole lot about it, how it behaves in various circumstances and so on, but we don't know what it is. And this is, of course, self-evidently true. Here's all this experience, right? It's completely obvious, completely palpable, entirely clear. The experience is right here. There's nothing in the way in between you and your experience, right? It's like completely, intimately present. What is it? You can't say. I mean, you can throw words at it, right? But that's all that it turns out that when we pretend to know about something, all we do is we're skillful at spin doctoring it. We throw a lot of words at it. We come up with really complex explanations involving a lot of words, and that, makes us seem as if we actually know what it is. Of course, you do know what it is experientially, but you can't analyze it. You can't explain it. You can't model it. You can't say, well, vision is like, what's vision? Here's your field of vision. What's it like? Well, it's a sideways bubble, ovoid bubble of light appearing in my consciousness. Okay, great. What's light? What's consciousness? What's appearing? Well, appearing means it's being seen. Okay, great. What's being seen? All these words just go around, and none of them end up capturing the thing itself. And yet here it is, completely obvious, completely detailed, completely self-evident, and you can't pin it down. Isn't that weird? I mean, isn't that bizarre? So it transcends rationality, because that's weird. It's bizarre. It's irrational. It's right here. It's completely obvious. It's not hidden, and yet it's completely and utterly indescribable. And it's not just because you're not smart enough. It's not just because we're not clever enough and don't know enough words. The nature of what it is transcendental. Even if you were the most brilliant person that ever lived, smarter than people who are going to have evolved 100,000 years from now, or whatever, or some superior race that makes humans look like slugs, right? Whatever. Still, you would be. So you'd have all this really subtle and incredible, elaborate logic and semantics to throw at it. It's still, you would not be able to pin it down. Your description would not be the thing. I mean, a very simple way of putting this is the map is not the terrain. And that's self-evident. I mean, it's a no-duh, we've all heard that a dozen times, whatever. But if you look at it closely, it's powerful, it's pregnant, it's got implications. The map cannot be the thing, which means any and all descriptions, no matter how ingenious, no matter how intelligent, no matter how inspired, no matter how inconceivably functional they are, miss the mark of capturing the thing itself. The only thing that's like experience is experience. Right? The only thing that's like vision is vision. The only thing that's like thought is thought. So how can you take thought and put it into words and have the words be thought? It can't happen. So it entirely transcends logic, rationality, describability, analysis, modeling, etc. So that's talking a little bit about what this substance is, what it is that is here. This field, your field of experience that is actually here right now. Okay, this actuality that is present. Right? It's something. Something is present. Your experience is something. It's the presence of a substance, the presence of a thing. It's not an abstraction. It's supremely actual, supremely tactile. Let me talk a while. We'll have an ongoing discussion for the next 2 days. You'll be sick of it. Guaranteed. Maybe not. So this is here. This actuality is here. So it's always been here. So what? I mean, I'm not telling you anything you don't know. If you stop to think about it, okay, yeah, that's true. But so what? Well, this is. I'm presenting this as a yoga, which means an engagement. It means something you can engage with, something you can participate in, something that is perhaps productive or at least interesting and time-consuming. So this is radiant presence. We'll get into what I mean by those words in a bit. Radiant presence is what this. Well, let's do it right now. Okay. Here is your experience. right? This actuality, the bubble of your experience is right here, right now, right? I mean, I can't see your experience, but I assume you can, and I assume you would say, yeah, my experience is here, no shit. So it's actually here. You can't say what it is, you can't do anything with it. But it's always been here, and so what? You know, it's always been here, we've always moved around in it and never really captured it, and generally ignore it pretty much and concentrate on, you know, all the soap opera of the details of our lives and so on. But is there any other way to be with this that's more productive, more interesting, more fulfilling, more anything? I don't know, maybe less productive, but anyway, just exploring the options. Is there any alternatives to just sort of being in this actuality, you know, as a silly person, you know, getting all excited about the soap operas? And the claim of this presentation this weekend is yes. And that is what I'm calling yoga, which is a way of engaging with this, which is different than the normal, which I said, a consensus reality way of being with your experience. And the yoga is very easy to do. It's not a yoga where you need to do a lot of postures or learn a lot of Sanskrit terminology, or, you know, not eat certain foods, or, you know, abstain from sex or have a lot of sex or whatever. Just all that stuff is just a wash. It doesn't matter. The yoga is very, very simple. It consists of seeing that everything we've been talking about is actually like that. You just take a moment in real time, look at your experience, and you go, yeah, this is pretty amazing. This is pretty amazing. That's the yoga. That could be easy, right? So, the yoga consists of seeing that this is so. And by this, of course, I mean everything we've been talking about, all the stuff that's elaborated on the first part of the sheet and so on. The yoga takes advantage of the inherent self-analysis and self-engagement that experience spontaneously is, because the engagement's already happening. Experience is already engaged with itself. You're already all over your experience, right? I mean, you're just bang, right? What else is there to do? And you're already analyzing it. You already have all sorts of ideas and thoughts and you know, engagement with what it is that is here, what's going on. So the engagement is already happening. The analysis is already happening. It's not like something you need to learn to do that you don't know how to do and you've never done before. You're already engaged with experience. You're already analyzing it. But the yoga takes advantage of this inherent engagement and self-analysis as the vehicle for verification, because this very same engagement and self-analysis, if you prime it with the fact of, wow, experience is pretty interesting. This that is here, this whole bubble of experience that's floating right here is very interesting, and it's very clearly more than I'm used to thinking of it. It's very clearly more than and different than people usually describe it. Space is a lot weirder than people say it is. Time is a lot weirder than people say it is. You know, subjectivity and objectivity are a lot weirder than people say they are. So on and so forth. You know, details are a lot weirder than people say it is, and so on. So you know, just by having that idea as a seed in your worldview, a seed in the way you relate to your experience, can subtly reorient your self-engagement and self-analysis with your experience to the point where you begin to engage with what it really is, the way it really is, rather than our usual normal human mode of engaging, which is basically insanity. Total insanity. Human normalcy is craziness. I mean, what's the definition of a crazy person? A crazy person who is, my definition, okay, as a total pseudo-psychologist, you know, bullshitter, my definition of insanity is a person who relates to things that are not a certain way as if they actually were. a person who relates to things that are unreal as if they were real. And human normalcy, consensus reality, human worldview, is complete and utter insanity. Because we relate to all of these abstractions as if they were actual, as if they were real, and we ignore what is actually present, which is the substance of experience. I mean, it's like a TV show. When you're watching a TV show and you're laughing at the things that are cavorting on the screen, you're basically engaging in insanity. All that's there is lights flashing on a screen, and you're being really engaged with something that's not actually there. It's implicit. The intelligence can effortlessly code it as being there, but it's not actually there. And we do exactly the same thing with all of our experience. So anyway, when you begin to play with the notion that this is so, when you begin to play with the notion that, the experience is really kind of interesting. It's kind of a little different than I'm used to thinking of it. And then being with experience itself and looking and seeing, yeah, that's really true. Gosh, things are a little weirder than I'm used to thinking of them. It's not like you need to jump in the deep end and completely throw away your human worldview. It's completely irrelevant. The point is just to notice the fact that things are a little more than you're used to thinking of them as being, a little other than the way you're used to thinking of them being, and yet you are actually participating in and feeling that more and other, those different ways that it is already. And so it's a matter of letting yourself notice what you've already been doing, letting yourself notice the basically what I call transcendental engagement with experience that you've always been doing, that just slips below the radar of describability. It slips below the radar of fitting into a conversation like, "Hi, how you doing? What's going on?" I mean, and those conversations are fine, but they don't really get to the meat of the matter, do they? They don't really get to what's really happening. Well, space and time seem to be appearing in consciousness, but consciousness transcends space and time. What's up with you? So this can be one way of making yourself really boring and alienating your friends, which you may look at as an upside, depending on how much pervert you are. But it doesn't have to. I mean, the nice thing about this yoga is it does not demand giving anything up. Human normalcy is all very well and good. It's like a game, and we all know that. We all intuitively feel that. You play the game. Someone comes in up to you and they make certain movements. It's like a game move. It's like you're playing cards. Someone throws down certain cards. You know how to respond. Someone throws down cards. You're playing poker. You don't get up and grab a pitcher of water and throw it over them. I assume maybe you do, but most people would do the appropriate thing within the game structure. So someone comes up to you and says, "Hi, how you doing? Haven't seen you in a while. How's it going?" You might say, "Oh, I'm doing great. How about you?" Gosh, a hell of a day, isn't it? No harm, no foul. It's just playing a game, but it's not true. It doesn't really address what's actually going on. It doesn't address the intimacy and the profundity of this actual event, of the presence of your experience. And so this is really just a way of letting yourself tune into that intimacy beyond the level of your self-identified personality, beyond the level of your persona, as your social persona or your model of yourself, your self-image, all these kinds of things. So, in practice, simply notice, feel, and we'll get back to this feel, it's really important, that any actual experience completely transcends logic, rationality, describability, analysis, modeling, etc. So, this word feel is a biggie. Right now, you are feeling your experience. The way you experience is by feeling it. We have all these words like see, hear. What does see mean? See means you're feeling the presence of life. Hear means you're feeling the presence of sound. Think means you're feeling the presence of thought. So on and so forth. Touch means you're feeling the presence of sensation. So experience is already being experienced tactilely, very, very intimately. you directly experience the texture of things, that's how you can tell your experience apart. How do you know the difference between when you're seeing something and when you're hearing something? Because you're an enabler. Because light feels different than sound does. Light has a different texture. And you know this because you're feeling light and you feel sound. Right? Light has a very different texture than sound. How do you know the difference between seeing something and feeling touch, Well, because they have very different textures. Light feels different than touch. Touch feels different than hearing. Hearing feels different than thought. Right? All these things feel different. So they're already being felt. We don't usually think of it that way, right? We think of sort of, I'm over here and my vision's over there and somehow I'm seeing it in some vague way. But it's not like that, is it? The knower of your experience, or let's say the knowing of your experience and the presence of light is like this. You're feeling it. Feeling the texture of the light, feeling the texture of thought, feeling the texture of sound, feeling the texture of all these things. Feeling the texture of all sorts of qualities that we don't have words for, right? I mean, in this talk I've been mainly talking about the sense fields, right? Vision, hearing, touch, smell, taste, thought. But there's all sorts of little vibes and moods and little zingies, little psychic impulse, just stuff that is just too weird to put into words, and yet it's actually present, and it feels like something. That's all being felt. Everything is being felt. So, and the way in which it's being felt completely and obviously transcends describability. What does light feel like? Right now, just feel light. Don't worry about how you do it. Just feel light. What does light feel like? You're feeling it. Right? It's immediately recognizable, but there's no way you can just put it in words. You can say, well, it's kind of fine, and it's kind of, almost insubstantial, but it kind of has it's not going to happen. You're not going to come up with an articulate way of saying what it is, and yet you do it. And so right away, when you feel vision, you're already outside of rationality. You're outside describability. You're outside of logic. What does sensation feel like? What does thought feel like? Well, thought is fun. Thought is something. We usually think of, I'm thinking it's about the words and the ideas. But if you look closely at thought, there's something present. You're experiencing something when thought is present, just like you're experiencing something when vision is present. What is thought? Well, it's very subtle, isn't it? I mean, it's like the northern lights, or just some very weird little wispy, but it's not nothing. If it was nothing, you wouldn't know when you were thinking. There wouldn't be anything there. You'd go looking for it and you wouldn't find anything. And that's not like that, right? I mean, there's no way to stop thinking, if only, right? And anything can happen. So thought is the presence of something. What is thought? Well, feel it. What is thought? What does thought feel like? What's the texture of thought? You can't imagine how to feel thought. You can't describe how to feel thought, and yet you can do it because you always are doing it. You already are feeling thought. Thought is really interesting. I mean, it's trippy. It's like the northern lights or something. I mean, even weirder. But it's not nothing. There's something there, and it's so obviously and palpably irrational. Irrational means beyond making sense of, beyond describing, beyond getting a handle on. So just by feeling your experience, letting yourself notice you're feeling your experience, you're beyond rationality. You're being with your experience as a reality that is transcendental. It transcends rationality. It transcends describability. And it inherently does. In every way. All of our pretense and our claims of describing things and rationalizing things is just spin doctoring. It's all hot air. It's all bullshit. And the best bullshitter is the one that, tells everyone what it is. Let's ask Albert Einstein what it is. Well, E equals mc squared. He doesn't know what energy is. He doesn't know what matter is. But he knows that if you take some matter and you enable it to behave in a certain way, it will contain such and such an energy. He doesn't know what the matter is, doesn't know what the energy is, but he can tell you a little bit about how it seems to behave. But even as it behaves that, he can't say what it is. Not because he's not smart, not because there's something wrong with him, not because if he was smarter he could, but because what it is indescribable. No one can say what anything actually is. Never has happened, never will happen. Life forms can evolve to the ultimate extreme of intelligence and functionality, and this still will be indescribable. Not because of a failing on our part, but because what it is that. It is like that. It is inherently transcendental. This is the presence of the divine. This is a miracle. What does miracle mean? It means something that's happening that's completely indescribable. Not because you're a bad describer, but because it's just not like that. It's not describable. Here it is. This is really here. How did it get here? What put it here? Is that question answerable? It's just not answerable. Oh, the Big Bang, it's all an echo of the Big Bang, which happened, X 16 billion years ago, and all of a sudden there was this big explosion, and everything was here. It's like, okay, cool, how did that work? Is that an explanation? What does that explain? And it sounds a little bit like the description of a miracle to me. So here this is, it's real, it's actual. What's doing it? Where does it come from? What's it made of? How is it being experienced? How is it so intelligent and conscious of itself and engaged with itself as all of this inconceivable, meaningful detail of experience? It's really happening. This is real. This is not an abstraction. This is for real. The experience is really here, and it really is as it is, and it's a complete mind fuck. I mean, it's completely just like, wow, forget about wrapping your head around it. And this is really, it's not just noticeable, but it's even obvious if you look at it, if you feel it, if you feel what it's like. Because feeling is intelligent. We often think you have to think about something to be intelligent. When you feel it, you're not. Feeling is very, very intelligent. Any of you artists work with your hands where you feel things like, feeling the texture of something as you engage with it. It's a very, very intimate, intelligent engagement. All experience is inherently an exercise of inconceivable hyperintelligence. We were talking a little bit earlier. I know I'm joining on and on. I'm going to stop in a minute. We were talking a little bit earlier about how effortlessly the intelligence can just like bang know what everything is without any processing, right? I mean, you walk into a room, you don't need to say, hold on a minute while I figure out what everything is. I mean, you know where the floor is and what it is. You know where the doors are. You know where the people are. You know. You don't like walk over and piss on a bookcase because you have to sit a while and think, oh no, wait a minute, this isn't the bathroom. It's not like that, is it? You just know. Like now. You know as soon as you see it. So there's this power of intelligence that is just inherent in experiencing. Experiencing is functional, it's smart. And not just a smart like a human smart of cleverness. It's a smart way beyond that. I mean, your intelligence is running your body right now. How are you doing that? Your intelligence is regulating your metabolism. It's regulating your blood pressure. There's inconceivable metabolic processes going on now, which is a constant balancing act of chaos. Your body is very busy trying to fall apart, and yet it manages to keep itself together effortlessly and spontaneously. You know what? You're doing that. What you are is doing that. You're not some little bystander that's riding along in that, like a kid in a child seat. You are this entity that is being you. You are you. And you are what is doing all that. We don't usually identify with that. We don't usually think of ourselves as that. But that is you. This is you. You are hyper-intelligent. You are beyond space and time. You are real, and all reality whatsoever appears within you because of you. Experience as we experience it consists of, you might think of it as being two layers. One layer is the raw data, the raw information, the raw energy presence that the actual experiential characteristic consists of. And the other layer, and this isn't literally two layers, but you can think of it that way. The other layer is a framework of interpretation that the mind spontaneously sets up as its way of parsing what's going on, what the energy consists of. Now, in normal human consensus reality, people are generally unaware of this and sort of lump these two layers together as if they were a unity. So there's the raw information of experiential characteristics, which is, of course, spontaneously present in experience. And then there's this interpretive framework, which in the case of normal human mode, is held to be objectively true. And much of this, well, let's say all of this, these interpretations, these interpretive frameworks, have the effect of limiting, censoring, filtering the actual condition, the actual raw information, in a way which makes it seem less than. It diminishes it. It makes it overall a paltry version of what it actually is. And so one approaches oneself, what one is, and what one's life is in a diminished capacity and a diminished assessment based upon these interpretive frameworks. And one may not be able to consciously and fully participate in the richness and amazing multidimensionality that you actually are, that this actually consists of, due to this kind of internal mental self-censorship that typically people aren't very aware of. Now, the mind effortlessly generates these interpretive frameworks, and these interpretive frameworks are actually not a problem. They don't need to stop. They can't stop. They can't be stopped. As long as there's a human mind, the mind will be spitting out these interpretations. That's what the mind does. But it turns out that once one recognizes that these interpretations are just essentially hypotheses, they're possibilities, possible interpretations of what might be going on, as opposed to certainties, as opposed to objective truths or objective facts, then one can have access to appreciating the direct transcendental energy presence that experience actually consists of, and not be hoodwinked by an unrealistic faith in these interpretive frameworks. And this is very easy to do, or let's say it can be very easy to do. Apparently it can also be very challenging because of the relatively limited number of people that seem to have apparent success in this, but that may be because they haven't been exposed to this information or to this condition clearly. I don't know. But at any rate, the wonderful opportunity, the crack in the facade, the great possibility is that even if one is enmeshed in interpretive frameworks, genuine raw experience is always and actually present. So it's available, it's accessible, it can be engaged with, it can be noticed, it can be appreciated. And in this engagement, it will reveal what it is. It shows what it is. It shows what its nature is, what its conditions are, which are radically other than any way of being that they are interpreted to be in any interpretive framework. No matter how artfully one's interpretive framework is, it will be paltry with relative to the real condition, because the real condition is intrinsically irrational, non-linear, inconceivable, literally inconceivable. It can't be conceived of. Not because we're stupid or intelligence isn't smart enough, but because the nature of what it is does not resolve into sufficient coherence to hold it being this or that. And I sum all of this qualities up in the word transcendental, not because it's particularly important, it's just a word, but it indicates the way in which this condition completely and utterly transcends being able to get a handle on it in human terms. And of course, any and all interpretive frameworks are dependent upon getting a handle on what things are. you can't erect an interpretive framework unless you have an interpretation. And an interpretation is basically holding something, saying, oh, this is like this, that is like that. And it turns out that in terms of the actual substance, the actual energy that experience consists of, this cannot be done. And this is directly obvious, immediately obvious, when one engages with the energy of direct experience as it is, outside the context of an interpretive framework. And then when one begins to see this, it's like a period of sensitivity training, or becoming trained in the nature of what this actually is, that so radically and fundamentally departs from anything that anyone has thought to be. As we talked about yesterday, some examples are experience is actually timeless. It's always now. No one has ever found a past or a future. They're theories, they're hypotheses. Experience is essentially spaceless. You're always here. There's no there. Any experience you have it here. And so on and so forth. So, normal models of space and time, causality, individual entities, and so on and so forth, just fall apart when one looks at what experience actually consists of outside the context of what we're used to interpreting it to be. In practice, it's probably dizzying and numbing, but anyway, almost at the end. In practice, this is best engaged with, particularly in the beginning, by feeling the texture of any experience. So, if you're seeing something, instead of focusing on the something that you think you're seeing, feel the texture of what vision is. Feel the texture of life. If you're feeling a sensation, instead of focusing on the object that you're used to attributing the sensation to, feel the texture of touch. The texture of what the experience of touch is as an energy. I mean, that's just a euphemism, but it's a way of sort of priming the pump for engaging with it. Even thought is an energy presence. You know you're thinking because there's something there, right? Thought is there, whatever thought is. I mean, obviously it's a very subtle energy presence, but it's not nothing. And so even thought, usually, we start thinking and bang, we're off and running, completely caught up in the train of thought, right? But actually, it's possible to feel the texture of thought as an actuality, as an experiential substance, if you will. And in doing so, you are undercutting the storyline. When you feel the presence of light, you're undercutting the storyline of, oh, I'm looking at such and such. That storyline may be concurrently present, but it doesn't actually in any way fully address or include the actuality of this inconceivably dimensional texture of the presence of light and consciousness, and so on. The same with sound. It doesn't matter where you look, you will find the same thing. You will discover this direct energy presence in consciousness. And I'm calling it energy presence in consciousness. It doesn't mean there's energy and there's consciousness and there's presence. These are all what it is, as I say, it cannot be said. It cannot be verbalized. It cannot be conceived of. So these words are, vague, poetic allusions in the hope of, again, priming the pump of being able to transcend them into this actual non-verbal presence that experience actually consists of. Anyway, so the trick is to, from time to time, let yourself trip on your experience. Let yourself just like feel the presence, feel what light feels like. Feel what sound feels like. Feel what touch feels like. Feel what thought feels like. Feel what subtle vibes and psychic zings feel. I mean, whatever, right? Words for this stuff. Just feel what it feels like. And then you'll drift off into thinking and analysis, and that's fine. Just let go. Very easy. So its best approach is like play, as like a game or an amusement. the trick is just to be very gentle and playful. If you get too dutiful, like, I'm doing a practice, I'm going to do a practice of engaging with raw experience now, If you get too dutiful, you're going to turn it into a concept. You're going to turn it into an interpretive framework. I'm doing a practice. And all of a sudden you've subverted the whole thing, which we do effortlessly and spontaneously because it's our normal mode. Most people just function that way. Most people, the mind instantly comes up with a rationalization or a description of what's going on. And again, this is not a problem. You don't need to suppress that or try and stop that. The trick, again, is to just gently and playfully just trip on your experience from time to time in spite of that. And so even if an interpretation or a narration is going on, you just go, wow, that's cool. And again, within a brief time, an instant or a second or a minute, you'll drift off into thought and interpretation. Fine, just let it go. Easy, no problem. Because that's what happens. Don't fight it. And be loose and easy with it. And then sooner or later, in a minute or 5 minutes or 10 minutes or an hour or a day or a week or a month, you'll find yourself again just sort of tripping on your experience and just gently, oh yeah, wow. And just feel what that actually is. Feel what is present, the way in which it is present. Feel what this presence is. And then, again, you'll find yourself drifting off into, ideas and interpretations. And let go, real easy. And that's the cycle. You just play with it that way. Like it's a game, as a flirtation, as an amusement. And here's the trick of it is, it does the work. It draws you into it. It's like a seduction. You don't need to apply yourself to get this. It's not like you're getting a graduate degree in something you need to bust your ass. On the contrary, you're just playing with this astounding texture that actuality happens to consist of. And in doing so, it is cumulative. Every time you explore this, you will feel it more and deeper and more fully, and it builds. It's like putting money in a piggy bank. Eventually, you'll have $1 million. It's not like, well, I lost it and now I have to start over again. Every time you do this, you'll be better at it the next time. It's cumulative, and best of all, it's seductive. It gets to be fun. It starts pulling you into it. It starts you'll just find yourself spending, hours staring at the wall, and it's going, I'm drooling. Sounds attractive, doesn't it? Something to aspire to. Anyway, that's not necessarily literally true, I think. Maybe. But, so it's a kind of an overview of what my approach is, what I suggest and try to make available to people in terms of helping them facilitate the details of approaching this. And that's what we spent the day on yesterday, and let's reiterate it. Let's take off and do more today. Excuse me a second, I have to do some machinations here. See, it's interesting that everything actually consists of these two layers. You could say, oh, look, I'm putting sugar in my coffee and it's doing it, but this presence is just there. How is it there? How is sugar going into the coffee? How is this happening? How does the paper get torn? How can none of these things, if you look at what's actually happening, none of these things are, why am I putting so much in? It's an unanswerable question.
That's a great mystery.
Stop that.
That's what we're subtle.
Anyway. So there's always these sort of two modes of being with experience, and ordinarily we smear them and we don't recognize that we are doing so. Because these interpretive frameworks are held unconsciously, so we don't know we're doing them. It's not something we decide to do. We don't decide to have an interpretive framework. The mind just spins them out, and having done so, it then assumes it is the case. This is a sugar packet. That is a cup. That is hopefully coffee in it. That's what the mind says. But what it really is an amazing presence in the field of vision. And to me, it's an amazing presence in the field of touch and in the field of sound. What is that presence? Oh, it's a bag of sugar. Well, the mind says it's a bag of sugar, but what is it? It is what it is, above and beyond, it is what it is very specifically and very exactly above and beyond the narration. And the detail and precision of what it actually is so utterly transcends the simplicity of, oh, it's a bag of sugar. For example, the experiential actuality of no two bags of sugar is ever the same. And yet they're all just bags of sugar. The mind, simplifies it, but the experience is, how many ways can this be experienced? It's different. It's a different experience, different experience. Right? They're all, it's like this continual morphing. Experience is this amazing continual morphing with absolute instability, absolute lack of duration. At every instant it's already becoming something else. I mean, this is the experiential actuality. But the mind goes, oh, it's just a bag of sugar and you're waving it around. What big deal? You can have it that way. That's cool. And most people do. But if you let yourself learn to appreciate, if you sort of train yourself, or let yourself sink into your own inherent sensitivity to this amazing dimensionality that experience consists of, you discover some really fascinating conditions. You discover multidimensionality, inconceivable multidimensionality. And it can't be said what that means, but it's immediately palpable what it is. You discover absolute non-resolvability. Anything is everything, and everything is anything. And again, that's gibberish when you put it into words, but you discover the fact of that as it actually is, because it's revealed directly by experience, etc., etc. And there's no point, again, trying to list the perks or list the things that one can discover, because, again, it sounds like gibberish as soon as you start listing them. But nonetheless, it is a fact that the actuality of experiencing direct experience as it is inconceivably amazing. Probably best of all, from the personal point of view, is you discover you're everything. You're actually everything. You're the whole of reality. You are not a separate being. You're not dependent on anything. The entire universe exists within you. You are not dependent on it. It's dependent upon you. You're beyond space and time. You're beyond birth and death. And that sounds great, and it happens to be literally true, but come and see for yourself. Why don't we start the day with a little experiment, if you'd like. So I want to say another thing I said yesterday, but I'll say it again today just as a reminder. It bears reminding. Please, this is about you, so don't be in passive audience mode where you're sort of sitting and I'm up here being the entertainer, doing the giving, and you're just being passive doing the taking, like you're watching TV or something. This is about you. So if I'm either talking about absolutely nothing or I'm talking about the actuality of your condition. So this is hopefully a very participatory engagement or meeting for you, where you can be, as these ideas and so on are being tossed out, look at your own experience and see if there's any way in which they correlate with anything that's actually going on for you right here, right now. Otherwise, it's just a lot of philosophy and pretty words, and boy, that sounds great, but who gives a shit? If this isn't for real for you in your experience here and now, it's hot air. It's a waste of time. You'd be better off being somewhere else. So just trying to be. You're the leader of this meeting. I'm just the catalyst. You're hitting the tennis balls. I'm just the backboard bouncing them back. So anyway, let's do a little experiment if you like. So here's your experience. Here it is. This is real. It's really here. Notice how your experience is doing itself. You don't need to put light in the field of vision. You don't need to put sound in your field of hearing. You don't need to put sensation in your field of touch. It's just spontaneously, continually refreshing itself, always showing up. Right? From where? From nowhere, from anywhere, from everywhere, who knows? It's a meaningless question. It's just always here. No effort. It does itself. Just feel that. Look at that. Look at the actuality of that. Not the idea. See all the light in your field of vision, just bang, just here. It's here-ness. It does itself. Feel what it feels like. Sound, all of these sense fields, thought, vibes, moods, little psychic things, all this stuff is just flashing in consciousness in real time, doing itself. Can't stop it, can't start it. Can't make it more, can't make it less. Just look at that, feel that. Feel this energy of experience. What is vision? What's your vision made of? What's light made of? Don't think about it, just feel it. Feel what it is that is present in your field of vision. It's something's there. What's it feel like? What's light feel like? If you close your eyes, there's still light. It might look like little tiny flickers and vague patterns or whatever. You open your eyes and there's light. When your eyes are open, the field of vision is no more or less full than when it's closed. It's just a slightly different characteristic in terms of its brightness and its apparent degree of coherence and so on, right? Just the strange energy presence spontaneously there. Now, what is it? What is this energy? Just feel it, check it out. Let it show you what it is. The same with sound. Right? Your field of hearing is just always full of this energy of sound. What is it? What's sound made of? Where does it stop? Where does it start? It's just here. Feel that here-ness, that unstoppable here-ness. It's completely meaningless, and yet somehow it's very pithy and full and juicy. This luscious sound energy. And just let yourself feel what it's like. Just feel that energy. Touch is good. Thought's amazing. Always this amazing aurora-like presence in the mind. Feel what it is. What's it made of? It's thought made of. Energy is thought. You just feel it. You can't answer the question. You just feel it. Just explore it. Notice how it's absolutely changing. It's completely unstable. Every instant it's different. Everything is different. No duration, no persistence whatsoever. Every instant is already different. Right now it's already new. Right now it's already new. It's always new right now. Exactly what's appearing in the way it's appearing. Yeah, how strange that is, how weird that is. How could that happen? The past conditions that you can remember it being are completely and utterly gone. They're just absolutely gone. They may as well never have been. It's completely vanished. just this, here, now. Just as it is. Feel what it feels like. You can't get to the bottom of what it feels like, can you? It's not like, oh, I got it, now I know what it feels like. The more you feel it, the deeper it is, the richer it is, the fuller it is, the more you find. You can just travel into it like you're traveling into deep space, and you're just always finding newness, always finding more. No end. This is here. This experiencing is here. Your experience is here. Can you find any there? How big is your experience? Where's its edges? The experiential field is kind of like a big bubble with all these different subfields of weird energy floating around in it, right? Does it have edges? How big is it? What's this bubble in? What's your experience in? Is it floating in something? Is it sitting on something? Something holding it up? Is it hanging from something? Where is this bubble of your experience that's right here? Where is it? What's its context? Anyway, this is some examples of different ways to play with this, to just sort of explore your experience, to sort of trip on it and let yourself be with it in fresh ways, and let yourself feel what is actually here, feel what is actually present, feel what this actually is. And you'll always find it surprising. No matter how fully and deeply you've explored it, every time you feel it, it's like, wow! It's always just a major wow factor. Because it's always surprising, it's always new, it's infinite, it's literally infinite. Which means you can never get to the bottom of it. You can never get to the completeness of it. You can never get to a point where, okay, now I got it, I know all about it, that's it, game over. It's never going to happen. So anyway, the whole practice, and heavily in quotes, of yoga of radiant presence is just looking at your own experience, letting yourself be with it directly as it actually is, and you will be amazed at what you discover, because it's amazing. I call it yoga of radiant presence because this that is here, the actuality of your experiential field that is real, that is here, is present. It's undeniably present. It is here. Right? There's no debate about that. It's just simply self-evident fact. And this presence of experience, this field of experience, always presents as experiential characteristics, always presents as something. It can be colors or sound or light or thought or subtle vibes or whatever. But it never ceases, it's never nothing. It can get very, very rarefied, like if you're in deep sleep, or say you're in heavy general anesthesia, or maybe after death, it's very, very subtle and rarefied and almost, like nothing relative to the heavy-handedness of the waking state. But in actuality, it's always full. It's always full of characteristics, and this I refer to as radiant. It's always radiantly presenting itself as something, as innuendo, as suggestion. And interestingly, you can never resolve what is presenting. This is the mind's game. The mind is endlessly trying to get it pinned down exactly what is present and exactly how it's present. But first of all, it's too unstable and fleeting in time to be resolved. And second of all, there's too much information. It's infinite. You can't tell what anything is because the closer you look at it, the more you find. So you never get to the bottom of it. It's not like you can sum, okay, now I know everything about it, I know what this is. That is never going to happen. The only way to make that happen is to pretend it's happening. And that's what interpretive frameworks do. They pretend they know what things are. Oh, you're a woman, you're a man, this is a spiritual talk, this is a room, this is space and time, we're in San Rafael. The mind just effortlessly does that. How comprehensive is that description? How much detail does it include? How precise is it? It's absurd. It's laughable. And yet human normalcy is to live your life more or less according to that kind of very, very, very rough averaging of holding things to be a certain way.